Good afternoon, everybody. I welcome you all. I welcome you all in this international webinar organized by Department of Physics, Shibpur Dinobondhoo Institution College, Howrah, West Bengal, India. I welcome our respected President of the governing body, Sri Brajamon Majumdar, respected members of the governing body, our faculty members of our college, our staff of our college, our distinguished speaker, Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay, the convener and HOD Department of Physics, Dr. Abhijit Datta, our distinguished YouTube viewers, and lastly but no less important, our dear students. Today's international webinar is a very interesting and very useful topic, that is mathematical remedy of heart attack, artificial intelligence as a life-saving kit. Now, as the heart is very often used to represent the pictorial representation of love, let us begin with love. Actually, love at first sight is not so great an absurdity as it is sometimes imagined to be, because people generally make up their minds as to the kind of person they like. And whenever they meet someone with the desired parameters on their mind, they fall in love. Similar is the case with the today's topic, that is the mathematical remedy of heart attack is not a fiction, it's a reality. In fact, heart attack occurs due to the blockage in one or more of the arteries that either reduces or stops blood flow to the heart. As a result of that, the part of the heart muscles remains without oxygen, and consequently the heart stops functioning, and the unfortunate event of heart failure occurs. And usually, very often, the blockage occurs due to the buildup of fat, cholesterol, and other substances which form a plaque, and the plaque ultimately prevents the flow of blood to the heart. And sometimes the plaque can rupture and form a clot, and the clot itself prevents the flow of the blood to the heart, and ultimately the unfortunate event of heart failure occurs. Now let us see what is mathematics in relation to this type of situation. You know that A is a function of X. That is, A is an event which depends upon the parameter X. Let us take an example. Suppose experience is a function of age. That is, as we become older, the more experienced we become. You may not fully agree with me, but you must have known the hierarchy, the data, the information, the knowledge, and ultimately the wisdom. And you will agree with me that wisdom does come with age. So wisdom is a function of age. That is, wisdom depends upon age. So let us use this functional relationship, or you may call the binary relationship, in terms of the cardiovascular function, that is the unfortunate event of heart failure. That is, A is a function of x1 to x100 for the sake of example. where A is the unfortunate event of heart attack, heart failure, that is HF, and X1 to X100 are the different clinical parameters responsible for heart failure. That is, it essentially signifies that the unfortunate event of heart failure depends upon so many parameters, so many clinical and other parameters. And here is the action that the mathematics can take. That the mathematics can take into consideration these parameters and ultimately prevent or sometimes provide better treatment in case of unfortunate event of heart failure. But the fact is that the parameters are so many. It is not 100. It may be 400 parameters that are involved in case of this cardiovascular function relation to heart failure, that it may be very difficult to manage all the things manually, even with the help of computer. So here lies the role of artificial intelligence. Let us see the parameters, the clinical parameters, some of the parameters. The list is not exhaustive. The list is only illustrative. The clinical parameters responsible for unfortunate heart failure, the age, the gender, the baseline characteristics involve heart rate, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, body weight, WBC, albumin, etc. There are so many parameters: uric acid, sodium, CRP, BNP, pressure across tricuspid valve, elevated jugular venous pressure, leg edema, and the causes of unfortunate heart failure are cardiomyopathy, hypertensive heart disease, ischemic heart disease, valvular heart disease, cardiac sarcoidosis, myocarditis, and the comorbidity causes of unfortunate heart failure includes the hypertension, diabetes mellitus, chronic AF, etc. So these are the parameters, and the medication after admission includes these things: use of dopamine, etc., use of nitroglycerin, use of intravenous diuretic, and the oral medication at the time of discharge or after the discharge is the beta blockers, the ACE inhibitor, diuretics, etc. So the thing is like that there are so many parameters that it will be better managed if we use the artificial intelligence in this particular region to predict, to prevent, and to provide better treatment. In fact, almost a year ago, Oxford University devised a biotimer or something like fingerprints that functions on the principles of machine language, and that is quite able to predict the problems in the heart well in advance. So these are the things that we need to consider in this today's seminar. And with this short introduction, I like to request Dr. Obhijit Datta to say a few words in this topic, and then introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay. Um, and then we are eagerly awaiting for the nice and illustrative presentation of none other than Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay. Now, Dr. Obhijit Datta.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Good afternoon to the principal, sir, Dr. Monidip Chandra, and good afternoon to all of you. And I think some of you are, for some of you, I think I should tell good morning, because some of you are from UK and Nigeria. So now I will come and convey my good morning to our respected speaker, Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay. I should now introduce our speaker, Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay. Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay is a theoretical physicist specializing in multidisciplinary applications of physics and computational mathematics. He works on unifying four diverse research areas. He works on quantitative biology, mathematical finance, soft matter physics, and material science. He has 70 plus papers in leading international journals. He is an editorial board member of the prestigious journal Nature and Frontiers Group, among others. He is an invited fellow of the Institute of Mathematics, UK. He is the first Indian Marie Curie Fellow in physics. He did his PhD from Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science on statistical and field theory turbulence in 2001. After doing his PhD, he did several postdoctoral works. First, he works as a postdoctoral fellow at Max Planck Institute, Dresden, Germany. After that, he was Humboldt Fellow at Hein-Meitner Institute, Berlin. He was research associate at University of Warwick, UK. He was Marie Curie Fellow at University of Padua, Italy. After all these postdoctoral works, he joined as faculty member at University of Edinburgh as a professor of physics. Then he had to return to India. Then here in India, he joined as faculty of University of Physics, University of Delhi, at the Department of Physics and Astrophysics. At present, Dr. Amit is a reader in mathematics at Aston University, Birmingham, UK. And he is affiliated to the nonlinearity and complexity research group. Now I should invite our respected speaker, Dr. Chattopadhyay, to share his research work with us. Over to you, Dr. Chattopadhyay.
Thank you, Abhijit. Just I will do the usual check, and thank you, Dr. Chandra. I'll do the usual check to start with to make sure that everything is audible, so you can hear me correct, right?
Yes.
Everything is okay.
I can hear.
Okay, so you can hear me, and I will now share the screen just to make sure that everything is working as it should. So you
yes, everything is okay. Everything is okay.
So, I mean, you can see the presentation file in front.
Yes, and in YouTube also.
Okay, perfect. So I will now put it on the full screen mode and get started with the talk itself. So you can see the first page of the talk in a full screen mode, right?
Yes.
Because I can't see anything, I can only see my computer. So I do not.
I can see it. It is perfect.
Okay, thank you. So once again, I will start with my note of thanks to the invitees, to the persons who invited me. And these are two people who have already given you the presentations, the introductory curtain raisers. So Dr. Abhijit Dotto, and I will say a few words about him just in a few seconds from now. and the principal, Dr. Chandra. Thank you. Thanks to both of you for inviting me for this presentation. Now, I should rather normally start by saying a warm welcome in a bright sunny morning, which it is not here in the UK, as people in most parts of the world will know UK is quite renowned for its weather in a negative way. So it's a bit of a drizzly weather today outside, but still good morning to my UK and the European audience, and a warm good afternoon to my Indian audience. I was, in fact, the way I wanted to start it, the presentation, is just to go a bit of a flashback mode. My association with Obhijitda goes a long way back. So it goes back to my PhD days in the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science. Just to highlight its importance in the background of Indian science, this is the institution which so far hosts the only Nobel laureate in physics, Professor C.V. Raman. So this is identified with him. There are other luminaries, but he is definitely by far the shooting star in the horizon. So that's where we both did our PhD, and this is where we actually got to know each other. We used to live in the hostel, and naturally a hostel life means a lot of interaction. He was slightly senior to me, but not a lot. And there was a bit of a good camaraderie between the two. He was in a slightly different department, but closely affiliated to physics. I was from theoretical physics, and that's how we all got started. So thanks, Obhijitda, again. Before I get started with the co-presentation, there's another person that I would like to commemorate and say my hearty words of gratitude about. This is Professor Shibdas Kormukar of Shibpur Dinobondhoo College, the institution that is actually hosting this seminar. He is the head of the department, to my understanding, of the Department of Mathematics. It is from him that I got started in serious mathematics in my life. So thank you, sir. Thank you for introducing me to mathematics, serious mathematics, and to the challenges of mathematics. I don't think I would have been here without you. Thank you. Dr. Chandra gave a wonderful introduction. Actually, he has lessened my load of talking about what this talk is all about. See, if we look at the first line of the presentation, the title, Mathematical Remedy of Heart Attack. Now, this is like an oxymoron. When we have a heart attack, we do not look for mathematics. When we have a heart attack, we look for doctors, we look for ambulance, we look for life-saving kits, we look for nurses, not mathematicians and physicists. So where do we actually come about? Where we actually come in the backstage. We come at a phase when the heart attack has not happened. So I, as a theoretical physicist, do not have an ad hoc solution once the heart attack has happened, but we probably would have very good solutions and suggestions for you, basically to preempt, protect, and thereby defer and sometimes even completely deter the occurrence of a heart attack. So the mathematical remedy of a heart attack is a bit of an antithesis in the sense that we are talking about how best to protect ourselves, our body, against an imminent heart attack, which, again, as Dr. Chandra has very correctly mentioned, it is just directly proportional to the age that we are at. And by age, I do not mean essentially the physical age, I actually mean the biological age. The significance is the following. So you might have people at age 60 or even 70 who are physically more agile, more active than a person who is at 30. So that person at 70 has a much lesser chance of having a heart attack than the person at 30, who, technically speaking, is comorbid. That means affected by many other forms of disease. I will come and go back and forth in between a few certain jargons that I will try to clarify you. And just because it's a webinar, we have a certain constraint. The problem with the webinar is, much like I would rather like to address a question from you straight ahead and straight up front, this is not possible because literally I can only see the screen in front. I cannot see the chat box. So I will rely on Obhijitda to relay me all the questions that you may have got at the very end of the talk, and then I will take them one by one. That's the plan. So the next line is artificial intelligence as a life-saving kit. I think, knowingly or unknowingly, all of us have been introduced to AI, the abbreviated form of artificial intelligence. So what is it? I'm not talking about biology. I'm not talking about anything technical. I'm just talking about something that we all of us use on an everyday basis. When you start jabbing on a mobile phone, or as a text, or you were sending an SMS message, or otherwise you were writing an email on a mobile phone, etc., even on your computers as well, I'm sure you have noticed that of late, over the last like a decade or so, increasingly, you are getting automatic prompts. So if you write, I am a good boy, when you write, I am a, the next word good very often is preempted. It automatically comes up. Or I'm a good, then boy or a girl automatically comes up. How is this happening? Well, somehow it's sort of reading your mind. And that reading your mind is happening based on a certain very tailored application of statistics. That branch of mathematics and statistics, which deals with preemption, that means prediction of what you are about to do, and thereby read your mind, and thereby basically devise a description of what you are expected to do. That methodology, that protocol is called artificial intelligence. This is a very crude description of what it is, but this essentially is the heart of the whole thing. As to the mathematical part of that, I will sort of go into cursory details. I will not bore you with a lot of mathematical descriptions, neither would I show you the mathematical codes, which are an integral part of artificial intelligence. They're challenging, dedicated, very technical mathematical programming. I will not go into such technical details unless you have a specific question on that, because my attention here would be twofold. First, heart attacks and what normally causes heart attack, and I will tackle only one of the typically two possibilities and the causes of heart attack. And then we will go into the mathematical preemption mechanism and go on to the outcome of what is it that we are actually predicting and why and how that could be useful for everybody. When I say a life-saving kit, I mean a life-saving kit for everybody. Just to give you a bit more detail about my present affiliation, you have heard the background. I'm presently in the mathematics department in a research institute, in an interdisciplinary research institute called Nonlinearity and Complexity Research Institute, research group. Astute, it is a long full form. I won't go into the full forms, but just to highlight, Astute is a research institute in Aston University, which is highlighting the principle of smart city, and healthy aging is very much an integral part of a smart city description. This is where we all come into play. The NCRG, Nonlinearity and Complexity Research Group, has a fantastic background in European and certainly in the United Kingdom science landscape. I think I wouldn't be overshooting my line at all when I claim that many, actually, perhaps number density-wise, most of the machine learning and artificial intelligence superstars that you see joining the horizon, and I'm not an artificial intelligence specialist myself, I'm a user, but the people who, through with artificial intelligence and machine learning, well, actually saw the roof. Many of them were staff members, were faculty members in NCRG at some point of time in their career. For example, Chris Bishop, the present Microsoft Research Director, and many others. So I can name Chris Bishop, I can name David Lowe, I can name Tipping, I can name Professor Ian Napney, the present Dean of Bristol University. It has a protracted and quite a charismatic presence. So what I am doing is actually basically making a bridge of their knowledge with a certain biological stuff, and in between I'm intervening with something of my own, which is stochastic mathematics. I'll come back to this in a second from now. So the step-by-step, so the plan of the talk would be starting with a bit of a statistical exploration. So basically highlighting why the problem we are talking about is a very important international problem affecting everybody, be it in the United Kingdom, Europe, America, India, literally anywhere. CHD is an abbreviation of coronary heart disease. So all forms of heart diseases related to the coronary arteries. So the classical one, there are two major ones. One is stroke and the other is cerebral thrombosis. So basically stroke, which is the popular parlance for a heart attack, is something that we'll be focusing on. The next would be a bit of a biological exposure. Now, I'm not trying to alarm you or anything like that, but the fact is, when you want to do a biological modeling, you literally need to understand a bit of biology. So that was a learning curve for me as a physicist. But the way I will try to present this topic for a mathematical and physics audience is through the lenses of a theoretical physicist. So I will go into just that much of a biological detail as is necessary to go into the detail of the problem. And as you can see, there are two words which I will not go into much details about other than clarifying what they mean in just about a minute's time. Atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis. Let's take them for two jargons for now. I will clarify them. Healthy aging. Now, this is what it is all about. How can we monitor our lifestyle to ensure healthy aging? So what are the lifestyle factors? What are the good factors? What are the bad factors? How can you engineer a fight in between the good and the bad factors, hopefully with the good factors winning the cause, meaning you are protected? So the same thing, the same principle is basically what is devised as a therapeutic or a vaccine mechanism, even in connection with the most recent menace that we are all suffering from. The reason for me not being in front of you but giving the talk as a webinar is COVID, for example. The principle remains the same. How can you protect your body by essentially aggravating the good factors who can then fight out the bad ones? Lifestyle factors, the predators, the bad ones, versus the mitigators, which are the good ones. Artificially intelligent model. Now, this is sort of a catchphrase. How many portions a day? A catch clause, rather. How many portions a day? Now, this is more like a British or an American or even a European description. So when somebody says, when you go to your doctor, the GP, the general practitioner, and the doctor looks at you, sees that you are not in that much of a good physical shape or something, then the typical question is, how many portions of fruit and vegetable are you consuming every day? The standard suggestion is 5 a day. And we will start right there. Why 5? Why not 3? Why not 7? Why not something else? And because that is intricately linked with the sort of quantitative answer that we are looking for, because mathematics is all about quantification. So we want numbers, not just qualitative details, as is normally the medical or the biological priority. So in mathematics, we want precise numbers, and not for the satisfaction of a mathematician, but basically to understand exactly what do you need to do in your real life to protect yourself from all this menace. Toolbox for healthy aging. This is already opened in the market. So we have already, through GitHub and the Aston repository, Aston University repository, we have already exposed all the artificial intelligence codes, mostly written in MATLAB, together with another toolbox that I will come to in a second, called NetLab. And they are available for usage. You can just download them. They're free to use. They're completely open source, open access. So this is basically abiding the principle of open access publication and open access psyche, because we want everybody to be healthy and safe. And one possible best way to do that is just doing it yourself. MUM, mend your mind, basically meaning tune your mind such that you can avoid the bads and focus on the goods. So we have used data sets, and I will show you the origin of the data sets of 12 European countries and the United Kingdom. We've also done the same thing for the United States, but I will show you the United States description today because it has certain different descriptions, and that is actually something that we are planning for a future publication. So that's sort of the plan for the day, and the eventual target is how all of them conjure up a magic in predicting heart attack. How, for example, my toolbox can analyze the different lifestyle factors, the predators against the mitigators, and preempt what sort of good versus bad combination of your lifestyle factors are contributing to a possible heart attack, and what could you possibly do to avoid that. So that is our red highlight here. So some facts to start with. So this is the facts are outlined from this particular database, Heart UK. It's a very popular charity. It's a big charity which subscribes and funds a lot of cardiovascular related research, both from the medical and from the mathematical perspective, primarily from the medical. In the UK, every 7 minutes, someone is dying of a heart attack. Every 12 minutes, someone has a stroke. Now, please note the distinction in between a heart attack and a stroke. I will not go into the biological details of that because in both cases I'm using a popular parlance. Heart attack, stroke are not exactly the same because the origin could be different. Our focus is primarily on what we will call stroke, which is basically the result of your arteries being clogged due to deposits of certain fatty acids and certain fatty type materials. I'll come back to that in a second. So 1.2 million men and 900,000 women at the moment are living with chronic angina. Cardiovascular disease, CVD, it's the full form. And I'm distinguishing between CVD and CHD because they are different. So cardiovascular disease encompasses all forms of heart-related disease, be it stroke-related or otherwise. I will give you an example in a second. Globally, 17.9 million people die every year, which is about more than approximately one-third of the death. This is coming from the WHO statistics, World Health Organization. 28.1% of all deaths and 14.1% of the total tally, I will tell you what tally means in India in 2016, compared with 15.2% and 6.9% in 1990. If you want numbers for an in-between year, for example, in 2010, if I vaguely remember, it was about 20% of all deaths. I don't remember the tally number. Tally means the disease, the debilitating after impact of having a stroke. That means something like a paralysis. Okay, so 28% of death, and in addition, 14% of limited physical functionality, something like a paralysis or similar forms of physical impairments. So this is the real statistics, and I'm really asking you to have a look at the gradient that it is shooting upwards, 15.2 going up to 28 in about 26 years time, 25 years time. That's a huge spike in number, and exactly what are we doing about that? Why is it being caused? And the one point that I really want to highlight in this talk is this is very much a connection between the lifestyle that we are in at the moment, the lifestyles that we have adopted, and the fast-paced, sort of glossy, fast food processed lifestyle that we mostly have indulged ourselves in the last 3 decades. This is a direct implication of that. 38% of males, 37%, slightly smaller number of female deaths under 75 in Europe are contributed by CVD. In UK alone, 250,000 deaths yearly, which is about 38% of all death. So it's more than one-third for the UK. So UK is particularly doing poorly in this regard. Now, CHD, the coronary heart disease, and thereby I will give you a suggestion as a distinction between CVD, cardiovascular disease, and CHD, coronary heart disease. The distinction is, for example, a CVD encompasses other forms of cardiovascular problems. For example, it could be some mild form of an ischemia. It could be a heart dilation. It could be heart arrhythmia. Now, heart arrhythmia is something very, very interesting, and a lot of mathematics, artificial intelligence have gone in analyzing it. We will not be doing that here. So cardiac arrhythmia means, so if you take a stethoscope and if you just put it on your heart, it emits double sounds, loop, doop. So they are always coming in sort of a periodic regularity. So this periodicity is broken, then what we have is called arrhythmia. Arrhythmia means violation of the rhythm. So when the heart rhythm is violated, what you have is cardiac arrhythmia. So these are not the topics of CHD. CHD is specifically focusing on strokes and stroke-related heart attacks. Globally, the single most common cause of death for people with age less than 65, 16% male and 10% female death in India alone, 23% of total and 32% of adult deaths in 2010-2013. Europe, 1.95 million die every year, and UK most common cause of death, 100,000 per year. Just compare the two numbers. So that means 250,000 approximately for CVD, of which about half, a bit less than half, for CHD alone. 40,000 from stroke, 1 in 5 men and 1 in 6 women die. So women are doing slightly better than men in this regard, and this is a statistic that we'll come across soon. Summary, it is an alarming statistics. Summary number 2, it is directly a reflection of the lifestyle, because the main difference between 1990 and 2016 is about lifestyle. A lot more people have got adapted to fast-paced, fast food-based lifestyles, and this is having a direct impact. Not my assumption. There are lots of other details in the form of statistics that I will show and analyze in a few minutes from now. What I'm showing you, it's a bit of a dodgy plot, and with due excuses to my biologist colleagues, I would have to say here that the biologists are not particularly renowned for their experience and expertise in terms of number crunching. This is an example of that. If you look at the y-axis and the x-axis labels, they look almost the same. The y-axis reads coronary disease mortality per 100,000 by sex, and the x-axis reads total coronary disease mortality per 100,000. It's a bit of a confusing description. I'm making life a lot simpler for you. The x-axis represents the total number of CHD deaths for every 100,000 people, and the y-axis is the number of them distinguished in between male and female dying out of stroke. So basically, how many of people dying out of CHD are dying only because of strokes, because stroke is something that we are talking about, and this is our focus today. Okay, so this is just the first bit of clarity. The second is, this part is literally simple, because there are three aspects to this particular plot. The numbers at the top might not be very revealing, but I will just read them out for you. So for example, here you have Sri Lanka, then Japan, and then there's a very small amating view. This is a very small reference, so we will not go into that. Then we have Guatemala here, and it ends with Northern Ireland at the top. And what you see is almost a linear spiky increase. So the top line of the two, the top line represents the male death because of stroke. The bottom line represents the female death because of stroke. The ones with yellow highlights are just identifying a few chosen countries, the ones that we have actually focused for our study. Why have we chosen just these countries? Because do we have a special love of these countries as opposed to the other ones? No. Simply because reliable and descriptive detailed data for all these countries were available together with the United States, that unfortunately was not consistently available for the other countries. But the protocol, as long as we have the protocol, we have all the mathematical codes, AI codes ready. If you give me the data, I will analyze it and give you the results straight away. That is possible. Now, the third bit here is, so the second part tells us men are dying a lot more than women because of cardiac death. And there's a diverging difference. That means increasingly people are dying even more when we change the country status. Now look at the left end, as I said, Sri Lanka and Japan. So these are the people which are, these are the countries which are apparently doing the best in terms of cardiac deaths, strokes. And Northern Ireland, Scotland are the two countries which are doing the worst. Okay, so the minimum number of people dying out of stroke are in Sri Lanka, Japan, and the lot. And the other end of the spectrum, people dying the most in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Every other country falls in between. There's another bit that I will also draw your highlight upon a bit later. If you just look at the countries, there's a clear geographical sort of a pattern emerging out of that. Just look at France, Spain, Italy. I'm just giving an example. France, Spain, Italy geographically are localized within Mediterranean Europe. So that part seemed to have, for good or for bad, the same sort of, or the same window of coronary heart disease related ailments and mortality, compared to some other forms like the Northern European countries are clustering on the other end. So clearly, something is seriously wrong with the food habits in the northern parts compared to the Mediterranean parts, and even they are outperformed by people, some less medically advanced countries coming from Asia, for example, Sri Lanka. So surely this has got something to do with the lifestyle and the food habits and other forms of focus beyond lifestyle and food habit. And this is now going into the region of preemption, so I will not do that. But clearly, some countries are doing well, some countries are not doing well, and the countries that are doing well, relatively well, are grouped within certain geographical locations compared to the countries that are not doing so well, and they again are grouped in a certain other location. So clearly, these different regions have very different food habits and lifestyle habits that are affecting the possibility of a heart attack. Summary: Sri Lanka and Japan show the best CHD resilience. Scotland and Northern Ireland are the worst affected. Points 1 and 2 above are largely gender dependent. Men suffer more from CHD than women, often with double as much mortality rate. So this is exactly what I have just told you, and this is the summary of the plot that we have seen. Why did I go into that much of detail for this plot? Because this plot is really an eye-opener, and that plot, if you could just excuse me for a second, please. My apologies. There was a sudden Skype call that I had to inform my daughter about. So, okay. So men suffer more from CHD than a woman, often with double as much mortality rate. CHD clearly has a geographical significance, and this is something that we will explore, and this is what is part of what we have found as well. Now, do the above facts suggest some pattern? According to me, absolutely. Yes, it does. What is coronary heart disease? Now, this is the biological part of the exploration that I'm just leading you through. Now, CHD, coronary heart disease, is the term that describes what happens when your heart's blood supply is choked. Why will it choke? Well, we will try and understand from a simple picture. And the processes which are medically called atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis. Atherosclerosis basically meaning your vessels, blood vessels, meaning the arteries and the veins being choked. And arteriosclerosis, effectively meaning specifically the arteries getting choked. They both contribute negatively. Exacerbation, that means spike up due to the lifestyle factors. Is this the worst offender? I claim yes. I'll come back to that in a second. Now, what are the sort of lifestyle factors that we would be looking at? What are the things that are clearly known to affect the probability of a heart attack? Smoking, alcohol consumption, fatty acid, that means fatty diets, amounting to high cholesterol, and there's a bit of a dodginess. I will come back to that in the next slide. High cholesterol, because high cholesterol alone is not very bad. Actually, it can be good at times. The genetic aspect, hereditary aspects, and that links up again with another form of genetic aspect, which is diabetes, clearly and statistically. And if you ask any doctor, any cardiologist, they will tell you that diabetes afflicted patients have a much higher probability of a heart attack than the others. Veritable collage, that means all the factors that we have mentioned, like smoking, alcohol, fatty acids, diabetes, etc., they compound basically to kick up your blood pressure, both systolic and the diastolic blood pressures, which is what we call hypertension. So in mathematical language, a high blood pressure is a function of all the top four, smoking, alcohol, etc., that we have just mentioned. And that in turn, individually and collectively, amount to a functionality of LSF, which is the lifestyle factor. Palliation, that means what can you do to basically cope with all this menace? You can eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and this is the question that I started out with, how many? Cereal consumption, like substitute your, and this is something that I'm actually going against, a popular diet, which is raging US and the UK actually. The overly protein-based diet, well, actually overly protein-based diets probably could be counterproductive. I do not have a one single answer for that, but there are indications of that. So moderate cereal consumption could actually be very helpful, unlike the popular belief. Exercising, diet control, etc. Now, all I want to say from here is, I think you will agree with me that some of the factors are common sense factors. Everybody knows that smoking a lot, a chain smoker suffocates a lot, starts coughing a lot, so naturally the body suffers. Alcohol, destructive for the body. Fast food in the form of fatty diets, destructive. Bad diabetes, people get emaciated, and people suffer a lot from many other comorbid diseases. So we know this. Fruit, vegetable, again, this is like a popular belief. So eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, you will be better off, is what our parents always used to say, and there's a lot of goodness in that. Cereal consumption, this is not so very clear because there's sort of two groups of mindsets here. One says, don't eat a lot of rice, for example. Well, this is important, this is correct. Don't eat a lot of rice, but do eat rice. Or, for that purpose, good old wheats and related forms. Now, what can we do about this? And what is this atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis? A very simplified, non-biological answer is cardiovascular disease that results in heavy cholesterol deposit in the inner lining of the coronary arteries, hardening them. Hardening means narrowing of arteries, it means choking and eventually a stroke. I just read it out for you, but now I will go into the picture and just a bit more of biological details. The first jargon that I'm exposing you onto is called a lipoprotein. So what is a lipoprotein? Well, a lipoprotein is basically a certain particular form of, it's sort of a complex, it's a biocomplex, which is responsible for transferring fatty acids from one part of the body to the other part. Now, why is this important and why is this a bit dodgy? Because you know that blood or any water-based solvent cannot basically cannot basically mix up with fats or fatty acid related stuff. So how will this happen? So you need a special carrier that does not exactly mix up, but makes an emulsion. So this is exactly what the lipoprotein does. Lipoprotein is basically a combination of phospholipids. And so what they do is they have two parts, a part that basically throws out all the hydrophobic parts, the hydrophilic parts. Hydrophilic means water affinity. So they don't want water to mix. And the other part, which has to be activated, is what is called the lipophilic part. That means the part that likes fats. So you have a fatty solvent at the central core, sort of the pinkish mass at the center, and you have the external coating, the external surrounding, which is trying to move out all the water from the horizon. So basically, you have, just imagine you have a tube. The tube is a blood vessel. Inside the blood vessel, you have materials lining up the blood vessel. The materials are your fatty acids. The fatty acids that have a very popular name, the cholesterols. And that's why, if you remember, just a few minutes ago, I said cholesterol are not necessarily the bad things. There are two types of cholesterols. One is called HDL, high-density lipoproteins, and LDL, low-density lipoproteins. The ones that are bad are the LDLs. Why are they bad? Because, as you can see from the picture, the thick red section at the surrounding, the one that's increasingly growing, the buildup begins. So that part is centrally occupied by the LDL. This is a plaque. This is a thick fatty acid-based stuff that cannot actually be moved. It's like a muck. Okay? So what happens when you have a lot of muck? Well, again, go back to the example of a tube, and the tube is increasingly getting constricted because you have a muck choking its flow. At some point, it will be completely choked. When it chokes, and if you have a pump that is still trying to push some liquid through the tube will burst. This is your heart attack. So the plaques, and I've given you an example of the plot from atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis plaque, severely choking, this is the rightmost figure that you see in front, severely choking the tube cavity and thereby causing a severe choke, which amounts to the rupturing of the blood vessel amounting to a stroke. What good is an HDL? I just mentioned it's a good one. So having high density lipoproteins, a lot of that in your body is actually very good, and it's mostly genetic, as I have come to learn. Why is it good? Because HDL is like a mop. So it's like your cleaner that tries to wash out the plaque built up by the LDL. Unfortunately, you are not doing a good service to your body when you're using a lot of fatty acids, smoking, and drinking, right? Why? Because the HDL, it's like your genetic profile. It will not change a lot, but the LDL would in a negative way. So the probability of the HDL cleaning out the LDL will substantially decrease, get lowered, as the LDL density keeps increasing because of our lifestyle. And this is exactly where this particular talk, this particular study comes into full play. We want to understand the number density, the rate of change of density of this growing plaque, how that plaque could actually be contained, if not controlled, by a suitable lifestyle. And that is exactly what we're trying to understand. Now, Again, the bad ones, the good ones. The bad ones are the high cholesterol, and I repeat again, by high cholesterol, I'm specifically talking about the LDL minus the HDL balance. So that is exactly what, when you look at your blood report, this is exactly what is defined as your cholesterol level. Very often you have the two differences, but the doctor is bothered with the difference, not with their absolute numbers. Alcohols, smoking, hypertension, both in the form of systolic and the diastolic blood pressures, food habits, which is a combination of the cholesterol and the triglycerides, the genetic impact, heredity, exercising habits. Sorry, exercising habits means the lack of exercising habits is what is a bad habit. And the good ones potentially are like having, as I mentioned, fruits, cereals, vegetables, exercising, healthy dieting. And thereby comes MIC, the known recommendation, 5 fruit veg portions a day. I think it's not just a UK special anymore, it's just sort of the popular parlance in any good doctor's chamber that you're going anywhere in the world, for example, in my country, in India. Why 5? Have you ever actually asked your doctor, why 5, why not 4? Why not 3, why not 7? If you have a doctor as a good family member and somebody who is actually having a good bit of reading beyond the regulation medical dosage, they will tell you that this number is just a hearsay. This number is basically to encourage you into the good habits, meaning they're encouraging you to have some fruit veg portions a day. Some is a very important point here. That some could be 5, it could be 7, it could even be 4. So it's not fixed. And we are out here to try and fix it if we can. Why 5 portions a day, not 4 or 7? G stands for the good factors, B stands for the bad factors. Now, if I supposedly start eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot, I don't eat anything, I just only eat fruits and vegetables all over the day, will this mean that I will have no heart attack? I'm talking not about normal heart attacks, I'm talking about strokes. So I'm excluding the possibility of cardiac arrhythmia and other forms. The answer is it will be substantially reduced, but obviously, it's common sense again, that with aging, the plaque that I just showed you, so the constriction being generated, it will grow. Why will it grow? Because with age, the blood vessel, your blood cavities, do not have the same level of elasticity, so that it cannot just contract and relax and thereby move the plaque out. They become a lot more solid. So the plaque has no position for it to be moved out, and hence it grows. Also, the HDL density reduces with growing age. Can I do, now this is a very classical example of what we are out here to do, can I basically increase my fruit intake by 5%, vegetable intake by 10%, I don't want to do that much of exercising, so decrease a bit of exercising, let's say by 3%. Will this sort of a combination allow me to have, let's say, a bit more of alcohol every week or every day, if I can? This is just an example. Is the answer yes? Is the answer no? Is it 5, 10, minus 3, and resulting in plus 3 for alcohol? Or is it some other combination? Or is it a bad combination overall? These are the sort of answers that we're looking for. How do I know the role and impact of heredity, comorbidity on CHD? This is a follow-up brand of research that I'm looking forward to. We do not yet have a direct answer to that. There are conjectures, there are qualitative ideas coming mostly from the medics, the doctors, and the medical scientists, and the biologists, but none of them have been quantified yet. Can a mathematical model serve as a remedy to a heart attack? And I again highlight the importance of the word remedy. Remedy is not a therapeutic. It is not a medication that I'm suggesting here. Although another brand of research that I do, and I'm very active on that, I've got 2+1 PhD students working on that topic. It's basically using computer simulations to do what is called drug repurposing. So drug repurposing effectively means how can you actually avail the present bans of all drugs available in the market and understand the biology and thereby the genetics of its action on the body to devise a new drug out of the existing lot of drugs that can act in a completely different horizon. This is a very active brand of research, so that would be a real remedy using computer science, which is not what I am doing. Just to give you an example of drug repurposing, Viagra, which was a very, very potent and fantastic heart-related drug, and as we know, it has a completely different usage elsewhere. The point is, its impact on heart diseases is still very much the same, but its impact on the other forms is also something that was unheard of, unthought of, and certainly not what it was initially intended for, but as it happens, it is brilliant in some other doing. Aspirin, again, a very good example. So these are sort of things where you use extensive computer simulations to understand the detailed biochemistry of all these different drugs and project that biochemistry information onto the genetic landscape and squeeze out that part of the protein chains that will tell you this part of the protein chain is responsible for that disease. So thereby can I form a chemical bond in between the two. This is a very different brand of research that I'm not leading you on to. These are some data repositories from which we have actually collected all the data. I'm not claiming that there are no better data repositories, but we haven't found any other open access repositories with that much of health information. So if you really look at the lot, we have got CHD data from 1970 to 2014. Then we have got, for example, cheese data 1970 to 2013. There are certain restrictions. Some of the repositories give generalized data, not male versus female data. So we were restricted on these regards, and I will show you the restrictions in a second now. Okay, so I had relevant this particular figure, not unknowingly, very knowingly, because I'm just trying to hammer the importance of geography in terms of CHD, in terms of heart attack. So clearly, countries like Spain, France, Italy are doing a lot better than countries like Ireland, Scotland, Finland, England, and Wales, etc. So something is wrong on the right side, something is good on the left side. What is it? So now, based on that, we have sort of subdivided the entire realm of 13 European countries, including the UK, although the UK is not in Europe anymore, as we all know. We have had the Brexit. So we have got 13 countries in all, subdivided into 4 distinguished regions. One is the United Kingdom, and then the Mediterranean bloc, as they call it, France, Italy, Spain, and Greece. And if you know, the best part of European cuisine probably relates to those parts. France, Italy, Spain, and Greece. Personally, I have a huge preference for the Greek and the Italian food, but I'm sure people, there are a lot of people amongst you who would love the French and the Spanish food as well. Scandinavian bloc, that's the extreme cold, the northern bloc. Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, all of them are very high on CHD impact, negative impact. Northern and Western European bloc, it's sort of a compromise in between the other 2 blocks, Mediterranean and the Scandinavian bloc. Okay, so we will analyze them in terms of the geographical significance, and we will see how that actually works. This is just to highlight the workflow schematic. So this is how the whole thing was done. Literature means the data resource, leading on to the data resource. So we first started from the data resource, raw data, then we synthesized those data to understand the statistics, which, as we will show shortly, amounted to some sort of a linear profile among most of the coordinates. This is just fortuitous, coincidental, and nothing more spectacular. If you have a non-linear profile that we do at times, we have ways of tackling them very well. There is no problem in this regard. Then we divided this linear statistics into sort of 2 distinguished subsections, the CVD death rate and the lifestyle parameters. And then we did something which is a very popular jargon in machine learning. It's called data visualization. I will give you some details of that. Data visualization simply means you take your data, run it through the black box of machine learning, and then you visualize, meaning try to group data according to their functional modes. I've already given you a lot of hint about what that sort of a group could mean from the previous slide. Remember the 4 geographical regions? I will show you that those data actually club together in those 4 clearly differentiated geographical regions with some overlaps, but they do. You can see the patterns. And then we go into some technical details of data visualization using, I have shown you 2, but we have actually done 4. PCA stands for Principal Component Analysis, NSC stands for the Neuroscale method, and then we take those inputs, go on to the prediction model, and then finally crunch those into a software, into an algorithm that actually will precisely tell you what is the heart attack probability coming out of your lifestyle, an epidemiological study. Now, the AI toolbox, this part, if you're not really of any mathematical or physical interest, you can switch it for, you can mute your speaker for the next 2 minutes or so. This is more for the mathematical audience. As I said at the start, I will not go into the details, but I will highlight what is it that we are actually using. Regression, linear and nonlinear, CHD, time, evolution. Okay, so how is the CHD profile, the coronary heart disease profile, changing with time for the different countries? And then how the different risk factors, the good and the bad ones, are changing with time. Okay, so this is then regressed using statistical regression techniques, both linear and nonlinear. And then we take that information and do data visualization. I will have to tell you something about a real big problem that anybody who is informed with statistics would know, even normal statistics. I'm not really asking you to go into the details of machine learning or similar. Now, you know the statistics can only be useful. You can only use statistics to make predictions if you have a lot of data. Lot means what? There is nuclear signature. Lot means really a lot. So the more, the better. So if you have, for example, highlighting a certain process, you have 100 data points, it will tell you something, but not a lot. But if you have 1,000 data points, it will tell you more. If you have 1,000,000 data points, it will probably tell you a lot more. I have shown you the data repositories just in a few slides ago, and you probably remember that one of them, CHD, for example, the data spanned 1970 to 2016. 2014, I think. 1970 to 2014. So that is, you would say, oh, that's a lot of data. Well, in terms of data points, you have 30 years and 14, so 44 data points. That's not a lot. What we really had to do for machine learning and artificial intelligence to be activated, and we had a good bit of luck there, we could actually profile this time evolving data in a mathematical formulation. So we sort of extrapolated data to get a mathematical formulation. And once you know your function fx, which is a function of x, you can change your x to any artificial value between 1 to 1,000,000 or a billion, if you want, to generate what we call the synthetic data, which are based on the real data curve, the real data signature. So this is how the prediction actually used synthesized data, synthetic data, based on the original patterns that we were lucky to have. And then those data were analyzed using the combination of machine learning protocols, PCA, NSC, generative topographic mapping, another method. I will not tell you any details about that. Gaussian process latent variable model. So basically assuming that the whole process is Gaussian and then understanding what latent variable is causing the long tail. Again, this is a bit more detailed for the statistical audience. And then we did some risk validation. Obviously, you have to know what sort of an error you're accumulating because of your statistical analysis, because that will tell you how good your numbers are in terms of prediction. And then continuity fraction of neighboring data points. So this is a description. I will not go into the technical details of that. And the next one is mean relative rank error calculation. So basically, these are the two risk validation protocols that we used. And then finally, the clustering. So basically, it's like this. So if you think of the plot, of the regional plot that I showed you, CHD varying with the number of mortality. So you remember that some countries like UK was sort of halfway inside the Scandinavian bloc. So that means if I block them in regions, UK has an overlap with the Scandinavian bloc, right? How do you analyze the regions in between this overlap? This is what is done using many clustering mechanisms. We have used the K-means clustering to that purpose. So this is sort of a statistical overview, and hopefully you will not hate me for that. But now I go on to the real results. I start with the United Kingdom CHD death rate. Here is a fantastic piece of information. Look at the purple solid line standing on the year 1992. What is this? Now, this is very important. I will come back to this in a second. This year is a remarkable year. Before that, why is it remarkable? Before I say anything about that, the blue line on the top, or the blue dots on the top, blue and yellow combination, that's for the male. The red and the green combination, that's for the female. Okay? UK spanning the years 1970 to 2010. So we are talking about approximately 40 years of data profiling. 1992 is the year when statin, I'm not going into the details of which particular statin form, but statin is basically a medication that anybody suffering from high cholesterol would be informed about. Statin basically does an external job equivalent to that of the HDL. So it basically clears up the muck left by LDL. So it cleans your cholesterol, and thereby it increases the blood flow within your arteries. That's the role of a statin. So if you have cholesterol, the doctor prescribes you some form of a statin. It could be rosuvastatin, it could be some other form of statin, but that's what it's used. Okay? 1992, statin was made publicly available to the UK through the National Health Service. And you clearly see the signature of that. Until 1992, both for the male and the female, there was a slowly increasing profile of incidence. So heart attack was increasing. Once statin was made publicly available, it showed a sharp decrease. And as I mentioned before, fortuitously, very luckily for us, a linear decrease. Luckily, because we have a very good functional fleet that then could generate loads and loads of synthetic data as much as we really want. So how does that actually look like? So here is a very simple example. If you look at fx, is initially an increasing profile, growing at the rate of 0.00056. Don't worry about the absolute value of the gradient numbers. It just tells you that it's positive. The one in yellow, fx is minus 0.0067, minus. That's important. That means it's now decreasing. Same is happening with the ladies. So the one in red, which is the one before 1992, the pre-statin era, CHD, heart attack was still increasing. And once statin was made available, it started decreasing much, much faster. So it's clearly a signature of the importance of how you could actually clean up your body. Now, statin is a therapeutic. It is a drug. Can we do a similar sort of functionality using a lifestyle control? And that is exactly what the emphasis is. This part is just, I will go back into one part. So I'm just looking at the parts beyond 1992. That means when CHD is decreasing. So just scooped out that part to highlight its importance. Please have a look. They're very, very linear, and I'm sure you will agree with me on that. So the post-statin era is clearly and consistently linear. Now, you could actually stop me at that point and you could ask me, if I go on forever, if I, let's say, go on to 2030 or 2050 or even 2100, will that mean the CHD will go and hit the x-axis to 0? Well, no, it will sort of stabilize into a plateau. But we haven't reached that result yet, so I can't comment on that. At the moment, we are seeing a negative trend. That's what I have to focus here. For the UK, these are the different lifestyle evolution factors, okay, varying with time. Let's start with the top left. I will give a bit more time on this particular slide because then we have similar slides for all the other countries. I will show them, but they look very similar. I don't have to spare a lot of description words for those because the description remains very identical. Now, the UK alcohol consumption measured in units of liters. If you have a look, and obviously you understand that this has got nothing to do with using statin or otherwise. So its alcohol consumption should, this is the top left plot, showed a sharp increasing spike between 1990 to, I would say, about 2004. And starting 2004, it has a slower gradient of decrease. The top right, UK cheese consumption, it's fast in the increase. So that means fast food consumption has substantially increased in lifestyle. Very bad. The second from the left. So we have two panels, the left panel and the right panel. The left second panel, UK daily smoker beyond the age of 15. So both for the male and the female, it is actually decreasing. You may already have noted that for alcohol and for the cheese supply, we do not have separate male-female profile. We have just a combinatory or mind profile. But for every other health lifestyle factor, we do have separate male and female statistics. This is a limitation of the database that we had access to, unfortunately. So the gradient of male is minus 29%, while the gradient of female is minus 41%. That means it's a very good thing that smoking is on the decrease. The second on the right column, UK systolic blood pressure. Again, it is the combinatory of all the factors like alcohol, cheese consumption, smoking, lack of exercising, every other possibility. And it's again on the decrease. So the other two are increases in cereal consumption and fruit and vegetable consumption. In short, people are actually fast adapting to a better form of a lifestyle, as you can clearly see. There's sort of a slight sound if it is happening. I don't know if if it's happening from my side. I can hear a sort of a bit of a sound from the background. Something like being
No
moved.
problem. Okay, you continue.
Okay. So the thing is, what we see here is some forms of lifestyle adaptation have been for the good, some have been really bad. So the good parts are like fruit cereal consumption have increased, smoking has decreased. That has resulted in probably the combination of the two has resulted in a decrease in the blood pressure just a bit. But the bad parts are alcohol and cheese consumption have substantially increased actually over the years. Now let's have a look of how that means. Now this is a bit of a statistical foray. This is the structure of a histogram. Just a quick recap. What is the histogram? It's a frequency chart. So literally taking the example of the top left, the pure alcohol profile, the x-axis is telling you, I'm looking at the first block, 9.5. It simply tells you if you divide the total consumption between 9.5 to 12 units over the week, and this is hard alcohol we are talking about, how many people fall in between 9.5 to, let's say, 9.7 or something, and then 9.7 to 10, etc., etc. So here, what this is telling you is a statistically analyzed version of the time periodic plot that I've shown in the previous slide. Okay, so this is crunching information for all the years and telling you which one is actually doing what. Because statistics tells us that histogram, the other name of non-normalized probability density function, simply is equivalent to every information, every possible detail that you may want about a system. And I'm going on to the Denmark profile. The Denmark lifestyle that they did not actually solve for some reason. Something is being a bit of a noise. If you could stop that, that would be very helpful, please. So if you just mute your mic from your side, that would do. So Denmark has a very different profile. If you remember the alcoholic consumption profile of the UK, it was initially increasing between 1990 to about 2004, and then it started a slow decrease. Here in Denmark, starting about, I would say, like from the year 1995 or so, it has seen a slow but steady decrease, which is good. Cheese consumption here too is on average on the increase. Smoking is on the decrease. Blood pressure is overall on the flattish plateau, but on the decrease a bit, especially beyond 2005. Cereal, fruit, veg consumption have increased. So people are informed about what good a lifestyle is. And this is the linear plot. I have just given you the y equal to mx plus c sort of a data fit on the top. Unlike the CHD profile for the UK, where you clearly saw that in UK CHD profile, you would actually have the male and the female plots going almost parallel to each other. For Denmark, they're not exactly parallel. So that means, effectively, while the men were doing very poorly at the start and women were doing a lot better in 1990, coming in closer to 2015 and now probably to 2020, their performances are actually converging. So that means they have both adapted to the better forms of lifestyle. This is the Finnish data, the Finnish CHD death rate. This is the profile generating that death rate. And again, you can, if you just look at the alcohol profile, it is very different to the CHD profile. The purple line is not meant for a data fit. It is just an indicator showing it's overall on the increase, which is bad. Okay, and then again, these are the data crunched, y equal to mx plus c fits. So basically, again, for Sweden, you see that the men and women were doing differently at the start. Women were doing better. But with growing years, men have started improving on their lifestyles as well. From Sweden, we go to Norway. And you might have noticed that I'm actually working through the Scandinavian group of countries at the moment. And can I just ask you to have a second look at these profiles, this plot. These are the statistics that we are having a look at. The CHD for Sweden, just look at the profiles, and that for Norway, and now that for Iceland, they are quite similar, and the gradient values, and I'll show you the numbers in a second, the gradient values are quite close to each other. In other words, they show similar statistical patterns depending on the geographical location. Now, from there, we are moving on to the Mediterranean region, France. And now, I think you already see that there's a very clear difference in signature. With growing years, men are doing even worse than women compared to those in the Scandinavian countries. So men are actually adapting to a poorer form of lifestyle because the curve is diverging as the year is increasing. Okay? So the male versus female profile actually tells us that women are doing perfectly fine, men are not. And this is a clear signature of what is actually happening here. It's almost a linear fit, barring the time region around 2000, when alcohol consumption is slowly on the decrease, but this is good. But to complement that, there's a very high intake of cheese consumption. If you look at the absolute numbers, 22, 24, 26, etc. kilos, let me just flip back a little bit to show you the numbers for Iceland. So the number was vacillating on and around 20. Yet the number is almost 3 times as much, or at least double. So that means the volume of cheese intake in the Mediterranean countries, the primary makers of top quality cheese, is actually increasing. And the bad thing here is, really bad thing, smoking, especially for women, are very much on the increase in France. And that has resulted in sort of a flattish blood pressure profile. It's not really increasing, but it's not really decreasing either. Although fruit veg consumption has slightly increased and cereal consumption has increased a lot. Now, you may again want to have a look at the cereal consumption absolute numbers. Look at the low end, it's about 110, okay? Now, let me just show you the absolute value for Iceland. It's about 85. If you remember, I told you that a bit more of cereal consumption is good, but a lot of cereal consumption is not good. It just makes you fat. It simply means that you're actually increasing your LDL probability of growth. And this is exactly what is happening for these countries. Italy, this is the profile for CHD. It has now sort of gone back to the numbers or the description, qualitative description shown by the Scandinavian countries. But again, please have a look at the absolute numbers on the y-axis. For the men, the top is 0.145, which is a lot higher than, which is a lot lower than that in the Scandinavian countries. Here it's about 0.3, a bit more than 0.3, and we have just seen 0.145. So clearly, the heart attack-related death in Italy is a lot better, a lot lower than that in Iceland or any other Scandinavian country for that purpose. So this is the Italian lifestyle that we see. Again, a decrease in alcohol consumption, increase in cheese consumption, an increasing smoking habit for the woman, decreasing for the men, though. Blood pressure sort of flattening out for the male, interestingly decreasing for the female. And cereal consumption has been very up and down. It's been very wildly swinging over the years. So it tells us sort of a fluctuating lifestyle. And fruit veg consumption is actually not improving here. Why so? Just look at the numbers. They're already eating a lot of food. You cannot improve on that. They're already eating effectively 300 kilos on a yearly basis, and you can't do much more than that. So if you just compare the numbers of Italy, 300 plus on the fruit veg consumption with, for example, Iceland, here you were seeing a number just a bit more than about 110. So overall, there's a scope for increase in Iceland. There's not much scope of increase in France, or for that purpose, certainly in Italy, and this is what the data is telling you. Spain is interesting. I have run a flat line, but clearly you see the hike in both the male and the female plots. The male one is the top plot, the blue one, but you see a spike on and around 1997. This is the time when mass usage of statin in public health service started getting used, and after that, there was a spiking decrease in heart attack rate in Spain. And here is the Spanish profile, a very similar sort of a profile, and unfortunately for Spain, fruit veg consumption seems to be on the decrease. This is the last plot. What is it telling us? Perhaps something to do with the economics. Cereal consumption, it's again on the flattish side, but not on the bad side. But again, the other factors have gone quite bad. Women smoking more, men smoking less, which is good. Blood pressure for the men is very flat. It's not improving, and that is very, very bad. because remember, we have our backsides in the wall at the time. We already have full access to statin. We do not have any drug beyond the present regime of statin drugs. So that means we cannot rely on drugs to protect us against the heart attacks. We have to rely on ourselves, meaning on our life choice. So this is for Greece, for Germany, and I'm moving a lot faster than I was doing previously. And now for Germany, you see sort of a very, very similar-ish profile. So the fruit veg consumption, well, cereal is increasing, not terribly good for that. Germany, fruit veg consumption is more or less in the static. There is a scope of improvement, but they're not. It's the question of a lifestyle choice. Smoking is flattish for the ladies and on the decay for the men, which is very good. And it is overall on the decrease for the part beyond the post-statin period. Netherlands, which is in the same geographical location according to our description, is showing a very, very similar sort of a profile. Switzerland, again the similar region, again a very, very similar sort of a profile. So in other words, we see similarity of trends depending on the geographical signatures. This is the numerics of the plots that I have just shown you, the data analysis that I have just shown you. This is the result of extensive simulation over initially for real data, merged through functional extrapolation, and then generating the synthetic data and then analyzing them. And this is what you see. So CHD overall is increasing both for men and women, for all the countries considered, in varying degrees though, depending on the geographical location. Women are doing substantially better than men in this regard, traditionally. Alcohol consumption for some countries, like for the UK, is increasing. For some countries like Denmark, it's decreasing. France, Italy, Spain, the good countries, the countries with relatively lower rates of heart attack incidence, clearly they are drinking a lot less, and that is impacting their lifestyle in a positive way. Smoking is overall on the decrease, but at varying levels depending on which country you are at. Unfortunately, though, for the women, it's not, they're improving, but they need to improve a lot more. The blood pressure is slowly decreasing, as if you remember, once again, blood pressure is a function. It depends on how many units of alcohol, smoking, cheese, etc. you are consuming, together with your other forms of comorbidity. For example, a patient with diabetes is more likely to have a higher blood pressure than the other ones. And there are other forms. And there are situations when it could actually be the negative blood pressure just dwindling on the other side. That could also happen in case of in case of situations when your blood pressure falls a lot. Cheese consumption is very varying, but overall it's positive, which is particularly not so good. So I have mentioned that as male and female data not available, but this is like a male-female summed up statistics. It's not just for male. So apologies for my description here. It's for male and female combined. Paths of higher dimensionality, data visualization. What have we just seen? So in terms of mathematics, we have seen that CHD, your heart attack, is a function of variables like alcohol, smoking, cheese, exercising, cereal, fruit, veg consumption, blood pressure, etc., etc. So in other words, it's multivariate data. And we have also seen that many of these variables, like for example, the blood pressure, is a function of the other variables. So it's a very complicated description in terms of mathematics. We will call them a function with implicit variables. Okay, multi-dimensional function with implicit variables, and it is extremely difficult to extricate information. Like if you increase your alcohol consumption by 5%, increase your fruit vegetable consumption by 10%, and decrease your smoking habit by 3%, what impact would that have on the CHD profile? You cannot look at that, because then you are looking at, if you plot them, you are looking at a description involving about 7 or 8 different dimensions, and you cannot get any squeeze any information out of that. This is what AI or data visualization will actually do. It will take all this information from all the different variables and project them using a statistics language on a lower dimensional plane. So how do we address the fact that a higher intake of alcohol could increase BP and in turn the CHD risk, or CHD risk may be minimized by additional fruit-veg consumption. The challenge is to project this big dimensional information to low dimensional information sufficiently accurately to give us a prediction. Okay? We are really close to the finish line, so don't worry. Projections and the techniques that we have used are a combination of linear and nonlinear techniques. The linear is principal component analysis, it's called PCA, and the nonlinear ones are the ones that I've mentioned: generative topographic modeling, GPLVM, the Gaussian process latent variable, and NSC is the neuroscale. Some very standard descriptions, nothing that we have devised by ourselves. This is, and I will skip this part because of time constraint, and I'm happy to go back into that. I just wanted to give you an overview of what PCA is all about in very simple terms. Let's cut out all this description. PCA simply means you take all the variables, you expect some sort of a linear relationship between all the variables, and then what you do is you look at the eigenvalues. So if you have n dimensions, you will have n eigenvalues. PCA is a technique that basically takes information from this n eigenvalues and n eigenvectors to project on a smaller dimension, typically 2 or 3 dimensions, and then see what are the new eigenvalues in this reduced dimensional space, how much of information have been lost. This is what it calculates, and then that tells you what is the quality of match that is happening when a higher dimensional information is projected onto a lower dimensional information using linear assumption, that linearity is assumption between the variables. This is what PCA is doing. This is just to give you an idea of when you are doing machine learning and artificial intelligence for that, what is it that you were saying? Do you see clear 4 different patterns profiled out based on the CHD death rate? So clearly, people with death rate between that means 15% to 10% belong to a certain region, then 15% to 20% to another region, then 20% to 25% a third region, and 25% to 30% in another group. And these are clearly functionalities of the 4 bad and the 2 good factors that we have been talking about. So if you take the 4 descriptors, you see this profile. If you take this was for the male, this is for the UK, this is for the female, very similar profile, but please just have a look at the width of, for example, the purple plot on the left. Here, it is varying between -3.5 to about -2.5. If you go back to the other one here, it's a lot flatter, it's a lot thicker. So that means more people are dying here in between the death rate of 10% to 15% compared to that for women. Now, this is what, these are the numbers, these are the eigenvalues, and the eigenvalues, let's not go into the ranking. It simply means lower the value of the eigenvalue in the projected lower dimensional space, PC1 and PC2 are the 2 eigenvalues, higher is its performance. Based on that, you can chart out that for the UK, based singularly on the bad factors and controlled by the good factors, alcohol is the worst cause of mortality for males, followed by systolic blood pressure, then followed by cheese, and then by smoking. So smoking is the worst offender, alcohol is the worst. Smoking is the least offender, alcohol is the worst. For females, it's somewhat different. Alcohol is still the worst, followed by cheese, then smoking, and then blood pressure. So women are doing a much better in terms of retaining their blood pressure. Men are not doing so much better in this regard. Both have the same worst denominator of health afflictor, and that is alcohol. The worst and the best one are different, though, smoking and blood pressure, respectively, for males and females. Now, when you bring in the good factors in the mix, something else happens, and I will come back to that later. This is the non-linear version of the machine learning. It's called neuroscale. What it basically uses you don't need to understand a lot. Data space on the block above is the real data that you have, the synthetic data. So that long, big dimensional data space involving all the variables is projected into a smaller dimension, where the projection is now based on the difference, like an Euclidean distance of separation. So when you do that Euclidean distance separation, and you take the metric as is defined in this function called E, and you optimize that metric, that optimization mechanism re-ranks these offending and the good factors. When you do that, first you get a visualization which clearly looks different to the ones, but again, The similarity part is they're grouped identically like in the previous case. So this is a second method just to compare the quality of the assumptions or the results from the first method. Now I have got all the bad and the good factors in for the male and then for the female. And now I can actually chart out the numbers. The principle remains the same. Smaller the number, better its performance is. Just one caution note here. You might see that the eigenvalues here are very close by in terms of numbers. So for example, SBP is 0.40939 for male, and smoking for male is 0.40941. When they're that close, you need to have a look at the second eigenvalue. When you do all of that, you re-rank, and you clearly see that the ranking choice differs. So the prediction from PCA and that from NSC are somewhat different. There's some similarity, but there's some difference as well. Okay, so clearly alcohol is not the worst offender here for the males, but blood pressure is. But if you remember, blood pressure is basically a function controlled by alcohol, smoking, cheese, etc. The process becomes even more complicated. So then what do? You basically take information from all these different machine learning protocols, do an ensemble average of the prediction, and then come to your conclusion. This is the conclusion. Okay.
Dr. Chattopadhyay,
Yes.
can we conclude within 5-6 minutes?
Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So this is the re-ranked profile. And what it says is, after all those machine learning mumbo jumbo, all six risk factors have been combined using multivariate analysis. And what you see here are two simple looking formulae crunched out of the number combination of all these machine learning protocols. This mixed combination, it's telling you that how the blood pressure is getting affected by alcohol, smoking, cheese in a negative way and in a positive way by cereal and fruit veg consumption. If you use that information, this is a representative matrix. So this actually answers one of the key questions that I started out with. Look at the fourth row, 1.1, 1.0, it's telling me if I decide to increase, if I decide to keep my alcohol and smoking consumption at whatever level I'm at, but increase my cheese consumption by 2.04%, my blood pressure will remain the same. As opposed to that, if I keep my alcohol, smoking, and cheese, this is row number 3, 1.2, 1.3, if I keep my alcohol, smoking, cheese consumption unchanged, my blood pressure could actually be decreased by -15% if I increase my cheese vegetable consumption by 20% and fruit veg by 30%. If I increase my cereal consumption by 20%, fruit veg by 30%, alcohol, smoking, cheese remaining the same, blood pressure will actually decrease, a direct numerical impact of the lifestyle factor that you could actually do for yourself. So in other words, this is a publication in Nature. If you're interested, you can actually go into that paper and you have all the details. It's an open access publication. You can access it yourself. So my conclusions: in the post-statin era, CHD has decreased. Lifestyle factors has created a very complicated mix of nonlinear structures affecting each other. About 10% difference in CHD rates between males and females. This is hard fact. And the solutions are CHD risk can be substantially lowered with lifestyle impact. And I've just shown you the plot in the table in the previous slide to show you the quantity of that impact. The software is freely available. We call it MUM, Mend Your Mind. And that's where we can actually come to an end. Thank you for your attention.
Yes. May I start some question answer session?
Sure.
Now, okay. The first one, I should tell that there are many factors on which the heart attack can be predicted, like cholesterol, blood pressure, good vegetables, alcohol, smoking, blood sugar, cheese, and all these things. But what may be the effect of music as a factor? and some works are going on at our Jadavpur University regarding this, the effect of music.
Okay, let me,
Is it it
quickly
may
answer
have
that.
any effect on it?
Okay, I will answer this straight away. Now, this is sort of a soft domain for me, I have to admit. I am aware of such works like musicology, for example. This is the subject, the impact of music, and other form of psychological impact on health. So this probably has an impact. I cannot quantify it, but all I can say is the protocol that we have established. If you give me the data for the musicological information, literally it will just be one more variable. In this case, it will be one more addition to the good variable list. We can just redo the whole analysis and we can still tell you what is the impact created by music from that study. I'm more than happy to engage in that sort of a collaboration if this is what you are interested in. Please feel free to communicate with me at my email address, which at this point I will simply write out on the chat box. Okay, Vijit, then we can go over to the next question. Vijit, you are muted. Vijit, you are muted.
Abhijit, you are not
Yes,
audible.
sorry.
Right.
Yes. Heart attacks are most often happen in bathrooms. We observe it actually. Is there any cause?
There is actually, but this is sort of a twilight regime. This is more a medical parlance that I'm using here. Typically, when we are in the baths, where the temperature is a lot lower, our blood pressure sometimes sees a sudden lowering. A suddenly lower blood pressure has a very negative impact on what is called the loop tube, the arrhythmia. So this typically is not what we are studying here, but this is the brunt of heart attacks, which are normally associated with people suffering from ischemia and cardiac arrhythmia. So for those people, and especially for the advanced people affected by the advanced forms of these diseases, they would be better off with having some sort of precaution when they're in the bathroom. That's right.
Yes. Okay, and the next question should go, is it possible to develop a model that is capable of predicting heart attacks 100%
there is nothing
accurately?
in the world that can be 100% accurate. I am not 100% accurate, neither is anybody in the world. So 100% accuracy is just an utopia. It will never really happen. But what could certainly be happening is, if we have very detailed database, like what I was saying at the start, then the prediction quality could be more subjective, because what I showed you at the moment is epidemiological statistics. That means it is not on an individual basis. It's basically over the country or over the region. But if you give me, and this is what we're actually working on together with one of the top hospitals in Midlands, it's a project that's about to start. So it's called the longitudinal time evolving data study. So when a patient anonymously is basically tracked over many years, and we see how the physical profile is of the medical profile of the patient is changing. If we can track that, again, we can put that within the same artificial intelligence workhorse that we have developed, and that then can actually be analyzed. And we are very keen on that, actually.
Yes. Professor Alpona Hira has raised the question. Actually, you probably answered the question. Are diabetic people more prone to heart attack or stroke?
Yes, they are. They are, because diabetes is a very convoluted comorbidity. So it's not just for heart attacks. You probably have noticed that for the COVID infection, the diabetes patients have to be kept very carefully away from the COVID infection. The same reason, comorbidity.
Okay. The next is there any collaboration with any clinical doctors with you to apply the modeling you are using and predicting the things?
If you have a look at, yes, very much so. If you actually have a look at this Nature paper that I cited, so all you have to do is type something like CHD my surname Chattopadhyay and then type Nature, you will get that paper. You can download it. One of the authors of that paper is Dr. Srikant Bellari. So he is one of the top diabetes and specialists as a cardiologist as well from Midlands, and he is a real medical doctor. So he is one. Then there's another person who is Professor Shundip Ghosh, another top endocrinologist and diabetes specialist from Midlands, with whom we are actually about to hopefully starting the longitudinal patient-specific data study about which I just mentioned.
Yes, yes, okay. Yes. So another one, the reference actually on algorithm you have used for prediction of heart attack. Some reference may be useful. Some of the audiences asked it. Probably that is the Nature paper.
It is the Nature paper. What I can easily do is I will just you can carry on with the questions, Ovijita. I will simply copy that paper so that you have access to straight away. Let me see. Yes. So I have already shared that in the chat box. Oh, it's the private chat box. So I have, I don't know if...
okay, I can send to that one. Private chat box, yes. Yes, I may try to copy. But another one is... okay, Professor A K Jaffrey raised that question actually. That the music is music may be a remedy for heart attack. Okay.
Yeah,
and
I am not a specialist on that, so it's perfectly possible, as I acknowledged.
And please, we have to share your email address to the audiences, because some of the audiences wanted to contact you.
I'm happy with that. I've already shared my email address. If it helps, I will just spell it out. Please feel free to copy it. It's A.K for Kumar CHATTOPADHYAY @Aston. The spelling is ASTON.AC Alpha Charlie .UK. And I just see a question that I think is an important one, which should be answered as well. It's from Sandeep Tripathi. Can artificial intelligence prediction be backtested? Yes, it can be. And of course, it has been. Of course.
Okay.
So the proof of the pudding is in eating it. I can say anything. I can say I'm the best predictor and I'm providing you with the answer to everything. Well, it's only as good if my answer actually agrees with real data. So what we have actually done in the first place was we used the data analysis, made our model, got the model, and then we took some new data and pumped it on the model to make such predictions and see how they actually fall on the predicted profiles. Actually, they do.
Okay, another one is, can ejection factor of heart be monitored using artificial intelligence?
This is supposed to be the last question, Abhijit.
Yes. Okay.
In principle, ejection factor can be monitored using artificial intelligence. Again, the point is simply this: artificial intelligence is not really a magic. It is good old statistical physics. The way that you will have to do that is simply if you could actually get access to the real data, because otherwise there's nothing that can actually be literally done.
You are not audible, Abhijit.
Yes. Now this is the end of question answer session. I should now give vote of thanks. I express my gratitude to our speaker for sharing his outstanding research findings which has been published in Nature, and it is useful for all of us. I express my gratitude to the governing body president of our college, Brojo Mohan Majumdar, and the governing body members of our college. I express my gratitude to, to our respected principal, Dr. Monideep Chandra, for encouragement to go ahead for this international webinar. We also took the burden, he also took the burden of almost all the technicalities. I am indebted to him. I express my sincere thank you to and thank you and gratitude to all my departmental faculty members, departmental staff for their constant cooperation, starting from the inception of the idea of conducting this international webinar. I also thank to all other colleagues of my college, Shibpur Dinobondhoo Institution College. I especially thank to Professor Shivdas Karmakar, bursar of our college, to help me at every stage of this of the arrangement of this international webinar. I should now thank to all the audience for their interest to participate in this important international seminar that is related to our lifestyle management. I also indebted to them also. Thank you for interest of all the participants. That is all from my side up to now. Now I think we should. So, Principal Sir, do you want to express anything?
Thank you very much, Abhijit. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Amit Chattopadhyay, for such an interesting and illustrative lecture. We have become greatly enriched, enlightened, and better informed. And so far as the research part is concerned, very much informative. One thing is that so far it has come out that apparently the factor of alcohol consumption and smoking remaining unchanged. Only consumption of cheese makes the things different. But I think this should be rechecked. This should be researched further, because definitely there are some factors responsible so far as smoking and alcohol consumption is concerned, so far as the heart failure is concerned, because they are quite visible factors in this area. Other thing remaining, research will go on, and in fact, the artificial intelligence displayed by machines, and these are particularly important in the field of cardiovascular management. That is the management of and prevention of heart failure, in the sense that it is simple, it is user friendly, and it is precise. That is there is a question of life and death. So the precise data is very much necessary, and to that extent, I think artificial intelligence is a great way out, is a great helping hand, and that has been quite iterated in the lecture of Dr. Chattopadhyay. We are very much indebted, and we hope that in future we also able to have Dr. Chattopadhyay in our webinar. And we thank all of the YouTube viewers, all of the organizers, our college staff, and our governing body, and that is the end of our this webinar.
Just one point, Dr. Chandra, my personal gratitude.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Amit.
That
thank you, Amit.
It's literally the question of you handling the entire technicality of hosting the whole thing to YouTube. You have been a magnificent help, and thank you very much for that.
No, thank you. It's no mention. It's my pleasure. Thank you. So I conclude the end of this webinar, and in future we also meet together. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.